Okay, so we're live. So thanks everyone for joining the Totally Unscripted version 3. Thanks to the people who are returning, and you've got a lot of stamina, well done. And thanks to those people that are joining us for the first time. And I want a special thanks to Martin, because we're using some kind of a new thing that none of us understand, but he apparently does, so that's great. And of course I want to thank him for putting together the splendid trailer for this week's Totally Unscripted. So Martin, pass it over to you, and you can tell people anything special they've got to do with the new system.
Thanks, Bruce. Oh, it's all as was before. People, if you're not aware, Google carved off Google Hangouts on there to YouTube. The only problem I've got is now I have to fill in 2 forms, so it's not too much of a headache. But anyway, on with the show. So it should be all the same as before. Oh, there is one thing that is going to be missing. You're not going to be able to do the Q&A from the Google Plus event page, but we are picking up comments. So if you post a comment on the Google Plus event page, we'll pick that up. So that's probably the best way to get questions in. And there's a link there. There's room in the Hangout if you want to come and join us in the Hangout as well. So some bits and pieces of news in the AppScript world. So let's actually start with something that the eagle-eyed amongst you might have spotted in the script editor, is that we now have a new service. It's error service. So it looks like a new service that somehow handles error messages. There isn't any documentation on this. We presume there will be documentation on this soon. We did reach out to Google to ask when the documentation will be out on this. They haven't got back to us, but we didn't give them a huge amount of notice. So something perhaps that we'll pick up in our next show. The other thing I'm just going to hand to Spencer to talk about is the end of OAuth flow for when you publish data from your spreadsheets and other places. So Spencer, I think you've got a couple of lines on that and some guidance for people who are struggling with that.
Yeah, so recently it was pointed out to Google that they had a security flaw in their Google Visualization API. And this caused the ability for unscrupulous people to be able to siphon off any data out of any spreadsheet without asking for any specific authorization to those spreadsheets. And so as a result, they added explicit scopes needed to be able to use the Google Visualization API. And in the AppScript world, I don't see much people using the, let's see, let's go to, I'm going to share my desktop real quick. Most people don't use it for the actual visualization. What they use it for is the, let's see, is my camera on?
Yes, I see your screen.
Okay, great, wonderful. All right, so most people use it for the SQL-like, they almost have a SQL query system that you can query a spreadsheet from, to where you can, you can see right here, you could actually send a SQL-like query to a spreadsheet and be able to return data back from it. And I've seen this as the most used case in the AppScript community. And previously, all you had to have was an OAuth token that provided identity, and they would use the permissions of the spreadsheet to determine if you have access to it. But what they realized that wasn't enough, so they added a specific. You now have to add a scope of spreadsheets / feed, or a drive level OAuth scope. So in addition to identity, you now also have to have either one of those 2 scopes. And then you'll be able to read private data using this query system, using the Google Visualization API. And in the AppScript world, it's as simple as making sure, like for example, that you have a scope. I'm showing that this is the method of getting a drive scope added to your project, of kind of forcing it in by adding a comment to the drive app service, so that will force the scope. And then passing along, when you do your call, right, in your header, you pass along the authorization header along with your OAuth token. And with these two things, you'll be able to access private spreadsheets. If you have like a public spreadsheet, no authorization is needed at all, and you could just query the URL as is if the sheet has been set as public. But for private, you have to have an OAuth token that includes identity and also a specific scope of drive or spreadsheet/feed. Now, if you were to use the sheets, the reason I'm not using the spreadsheet app service is that it does not recognize the specific scope that AppScript adds to your project. It doesn't recognize that as an authorized scope. So I'm using the drive service, which it does recognize as an authorized scope. And I actually put a trouble ticket in for that, so they would be able to accept the scope that is added using the spreadsheet app service. And that's pretty much it. If you haven't seen it, it's a really cool way of accessing data through using SQL commands right to your spreadsheet. And that's pretty much all I have.
Thanks, Spencer. So just to underline, this is only an issue if your spreadsheet isn't shared in some way. So that could be shared with a view, anyone with view or anyone with edit. I'm just thinking on the last one. Anyone with edit? Certainly, I know with anyone with view has been fine.
Yeah, in fact, it doesn't matter if I actually, even if I'm trying to access my own spreadsheet, I still have to have that scope in there. So even if it's private, I still have to have the additional scope, including identity, also either drive service or a spreadsheet feed scope to be able to access it. And that's just a security precaution to prevent third-party people from siphoning off data out of my spreadsheets.
But it will work with anyone. If your spreadsheet is set up with anyone with view access, certainly the Google visualization API stuff that I've still got up isn't throwing any error messages.
Correct. If it's set for public, there's no OAuth requirement at all. Okay. If it's open for anybody, there's nothing. You can redirect any anonymous user that's not currently authenticated using their Google account, and it'll work just fine. This new setting is specifically for sheets that are set up as privately shared, or even shared within your domain. Shared within your domain is still considered private. You'll still need to have the additional OAuth token or scope added to your token.
Well, thanks for that, Spencer. So moving on, some other new things that you might spotted popping up this time in the actual documentation is we now have a new advanced service for Tag Manager. So if you're not familiar with Google Tag Manager, it's quite a cool service. It's similar to how you can you insert your Google Analytics tracking code into websites, but you can do a lot more. So basically, you have a cloud interface that allows you to add stuff into pages, JavaScript, and the news is that we now have Google AppScript access through an advanced service to do things like configure accounts, and I think you can update some of this stuff as well with things like variables and triggers. We'll try and get someone perhaps next month to kick the tires on that one and let you see what you can actually do with that. If you're not familiar with Google Tag Manager, it's something I use all the time, and it's very useful, and it's something you should go and have a look at. So that was the quick news. I'm trying to condense this into a shortest period as possible, because then when I do the highlights reel, it's not going to be 14 minutes long. So, with no further ado, we're going to go on and we'll welcome back Steve Webster to talk about monetization within add-ons. In the part of the show I wanted to call Script Rich Quick, but no one liked that. Over to you, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Nice try, though, right?
It's clever.
Yes. All right, so let me share a presentation. And let me share my screen. And may I have an acknowledgement that you can't see my screen?
Yep, I got that.
Great. Okay, so I consider this topic just starting the conversation. There's much that could be said about monetizing add-ons. And by add-ons, I'm referring to Google Sheets, Google Docs, or even Google Forms. So let's continue. So I'm going to try to keep this to around 15 minutes. So there's strategy and a philosophy, how to collect funds. We're going to do a quick demo, and then after this broadcast, a few hours later, I'll share some sample code. All right, so let's talk about some strategy stuff. An example would be my remove blank rows, where that was created from the very beginning of the add-on development, and it was just a free service. And then, just like other add-on developers, sometimes you get more support calls, or you want to put more time into the add-on to make it better and better. Well, time sometimes equates to money. So over a course of time, you start thinking about monetizing. So that's what I did in that use case. So I just want to share some of the things that I think might benefit others. The first sub-bullet point there is always offer a free service with high quality and no limitations. In other words, over-deliver. I have seen some add-on attempts where they use this freemium philosophy where they offer a free component, and if you want more features, you have to pay for it. However, if that's not done correctly, you're going to get reviews that says bait and switch. You can't do anything unless you pay for something. And then at that point, your whole add-on is going to implode on itself. It's going to be a waste of your time. So it's important to create a free service, fully featured, high quality, no limitations, and keep supporting that and making it better and better. Okay? And then later, you can come back to add another feature that hopefully is related to that add-on and start introducing premiums. So I'll give a demo about that soon. A design with just a few clicks, or even one click. I challenged myself when I designed remove blank rows. I thought, okay, how does Microsoft Excel, how many clicks do they have to do? So I looked into it. I said, can I beat that? You know, can I maybe even do it in one click? So that's one of the things I wanted to share. Challenge yourself with a design. Think about the end user. Make it as simple and streamlined as possible, and as clean, of course. So, for example, I set up my remove blank rows where I have a default check mark in one box, and if they just want to highlight their entire sheet to remove blank rows, they just have to click once. So that's an example. Next one is patience. Sometimes, at least with me, there's this tendency to hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, especially if you're planning to monetize, to make some money. But I've learned that it's best to take your time, let things take its course. And in this case, I'm glad I did, because with remove blank rows, for example, I think it's around 50,000 installs on the Chrome store. So that means you have a good base. So then later, maybe a year later, if you don't want to wait a year, maybe it's 6 months or 3 months, but sometime later, once people are using the free service, is probably a good time to be patient and then introduce those premium features. Customer service, exceed expectations. The other add-on I ended up forming a partnership with a former customer, and it's to send outbound SMS text messages. It's called Text G Blaster. And the example I can share there is we had a user who sent out, I don't know, I think like 2,000 text messages, and there was a flaw in the code in the sense where we didn't expect something. You know, you test the heck out of it, but there's always something. So in this case, at the end of the text message, they put hyperlink, but we add a suffix to every text message, hyphen no reply. We don't want people to reply. It's outbound only. Well, if you add a hyphen no reply to a existing URL, it's going to think the whole link is that, and now the link isn't functional. So as an example for customer service, he reported the problem. He left his phone number in the form that we had, which was optional, and I called him, and he was blown away. He couldn't believe that someone called him for an app personally. So that exceeded his expectation, and to make a long story short, I ended up crediting him all that plus more, and he became like our #2 customer for the past year. So that's an example of customer service. Collect data in a database or keep it simple. I think it really depends on your add-on. With TextGBlaster, a lot of transactions are going on. So we are leveraging two things, Google Spreadsheet as a simple database, and as well as Firebase. However, with remove blank rows, I wanted to challenge myself to keep it minimal, right? What is the least amount of work do I need to do to still have it monetized? So in this case, I was leveraging the property service as my simple database, where if it was user specific, I would use the user method of the property service. Okay, how to collect funds, PayPal versus Stripe. So let's move on to the next slide. You want to leverage third-party services. There's PayPal, Stripe, there may be a few others, but those are the two big ones that I've noticed. I'm currently using PayPal for donations for the free component part. In fact, it was a progress. Before I introduced premium features, all I had was the free component, and then after about 2 years, I added a donation button, and I am using PayPal at this point in time. But one of the problems I'm concerned about PayPal is the conversion rate from this screen. If they're not using PayPal, they have to go all the way down to this little continue link to enter their credit card number. So that was really troublesome to me. So I decided to move on to Stripe. Now, if you haven't heard of Stripe, you can visit it at stripe.com to learn more. But I get the sense that it was designed for the developer first, and then, of course, the consumer uses it, right, your customers. So I'm a big fan of Stripe, and this is an example of the screen. It's very simple. Enter your email, credit card number. You can even make it enter a zip code if you want. You can have the customer, if they want to remember me so they don't have to type as much, they can do that as well. It's purely an option. So when this screen appears, you have nothing to do with it. You're not collecting the credit card number, which is something I didn't want to worry about. So Stripe does that service. They charge similar fees as PayPal, and then monies in 2 days can go to your banking account. So let's do a demo. Let me escape out of here, and let me increase my screen size here a bit. All right, so here I have a development copy of my remove blank rows besides the production version. So here is the free version, where I've been adding more options to it to make it as best as it can be, in my opinion, because I collect feedback from the feedback link down below, and over a period of time I try to add in those features. So recently I've added the premium portion, and I decided to do something a little different. With Stripe, you can do subscriptions, But I decided to do it a little different. In fact, it's very, very much the same as our Text G-Blaster SMS texting, where I'm going to offer them 50 tries of their premium features. And in other words, I'm not limiting any functionality in the premium features. I'm giving them everything, and you can try it 50 times. And if you like it, then you can fund your account. And then once you click that button maybe 100 times or what have you, like in this example, then it will automatically prompt you. So let's go ahead and do that example so I can show you what I mean. So let's say I choose one of these premium options. You start off with 50, but in this case I prepared the demo where I got one left. So let's say I will go ahead and run this for the date version here. So in this date I'm going to hide March 3/1 to whatever. So it did hide that, and now you'll notice the premium balance has gone to 0. And I'm leveraging property service using the user method for that. So now I'll just click this again and see and watch what happens. It recognizes the premium balance is now 0, and I'm now prompting them to make a choice. How many more uses of this do you want to use? So in this case, this can work with not only this particular premium option, but all future premium options. Again, the free portion is always free, but the premium portion, these can be applied to any of the premium portions. So if I click buy, you'll notice that I have test mode. What's nice with Stripe, you can actually have a like a secret token type of thing for just testing purposes. So that means I can type in some email address, and then they have this reserved card number, a bunch of 4 2s, and it'll actually process it as if it was a live account. Okay. And if I click pay, it verifies everything. If it's not verified, then the callback will tell me. In this case, everything was verified with that test credit card number. And then based on the callback, the app script is fired, and I upload the balance from 0 or change it from 0 to whatever they selected, which was 100. And then they can continue on. Now going back to the slides. Okay, actually, that is it. So I'm done with my presentation, and I'll turn off my screen share. And are there any questions?
That was great, Steve. So rather than my usual jump in and steal everyone's opportunity to ask a question, I'm not going to say anything for a couple of seconds.
Okay.
This is your opportunity, folks.
And if not, we also have feedback and comments, as it was mentioned.
Well, I got a question, Steve, to do with the process around evaluating add-ons for publishing. Now, when you've got monetization in them, how do you get Google to test it?
Google has not tested this.
Okay.
Because from my experience, once you introduce a brand new add-on, you go through the vetting and review process. And then the impression I get, Bruce, is randomly they will check future updates. And at this point in time, there hasn't been a review.
Okay. So because you initially published it without any monetization, they never tested it then, and they haven't tested it afterwards.
Right.
Okay. That's great.
Right. But who's to say in the next update they may go ahead and randomly say, let's slow down and let's review.
Yeah. Okay. So if they were to do that, what would you do in terms of, would you give them that account that was test mode or something? Is that what you would do?
Well, that's a good question. I would just simply work with them, and most likely that's a very nice thing for them to test. Yeah. Because with Strike, you can go in this test development mode and no harm done. So yeah, most likely. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm still holding my tongue.
And like I said, well, before you say that, real quick, I will be sharing some sample code in the next few hours, but go ahead.
That was it. I was going to ask if you had a new sample code or boilerplate code that you could put up.
Yes, and it'll be just $1,000 fee. No, just kidding. I'll just keep it real simple.
Well, no, you can only look at the first 10 lines, and if you want to look at the next 10, you've got to pay.
Monetization.
That's a good way to do it.
You could put a timeout on a Google Doc. It would self-implode after.
Yeah. But again, there's much that can be said about monetization, and I kind of consider this starting the conversation. So depending on feedback, we can always talk more about this in future episodes.
I've got a list of questions, so I'm going to have to ask you one. Well, it's more of an observation, and it's the fact that Stripe having in my day job had to implement PayPal into web services. It's a real pain because you have to, certainly on the PayPal Express, you have to send people off your site. Where in Stripe, you're still there. You know everything's coming into the sidebar. You're keeping your customer there. You're not sending them off and back again.
In fact, that's one of my strategies for my add-ons. No matter which of the two that I was explaining, I want them to stay there. Even if I have a how-to video, it's going to pop up in front of their screen over their spreadsheet. I don't want them to leave. So that's another strategy, because sometimes when they leave, you get distracted and you don't come back.
I'm just going to pause, let someone else ask something if they want. Well, thanks for that, Steve. I think the way you pitched it as well in terms of that whole customer experience, I think is valuable information for people thinking about wanting to monetize their add-on. So I think some excellent advice there, and we all look forward to you releasing code so that we can implement in our own add-ons.
Make some money.
I suppose you take a cut, right?
No, not in this case.
Well, thanks again, Steve, for that. Yeah. And as you said, it was a start of a conversation. So I'm sure people can follow up in the add-ons Google Plus community if there's particular things that they want to pick up on that.
Yes.
And what I think we'll do is we'll move on to. Oh, sorry. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think I have a delay because I'm on a Chromebook. But Steve, this is a commercial question. How successful do you find the monetization effort so far? Is it rewarding for you financially?
Well, I just broke $1 billion. No, I haven't gone that far. My philosophy is keep throwing out some monetization add-ons or apps, whatever, because my hope is maybe out of 10 or 15 or 20, one of them may be more viral and more volume and therefore more money. So with my Text G Blaster, we have repeat customers, and once a month, my partner and I split the fees 50-50, but we're underneath $1,000 per month profit at this point. But for just over a year, well, much investment besides sweat equity, it's pretty good. And I just started with remove blank rows, so we'll see how that goes.
I suppose that's one of the things you've got to, see how it goes, and it's finding those levels that people are willing to pay for stuff. So experimenting. Yeah,
another philosophy is
thank you.
Is the value, and try to over-deliver, because that way you can get word of mouth too to work in your favor.
Well, thanks again, Steve. And Steve has just done an all-nighter, so we thank him for staying a bit longer. You can go to sleep now. Okay. And we move on to Bruce. Bruce is going to talk about Exponential Backoff and how you can optimize your scripts for when you hit into rate limiting issues. So over to you, Bruce.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me get into the right mode. Okay, are we good?
We are good.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to talk about rate limiting, which you've all come across in the course of using AppScript. It can be frustrating when it tells you you're doing things too quickly. So I'm going to talk about why that happens and strategies for getting around it. So first of all, this is what you see. Service invoked too many times in a short time. And the advice you get is to try sleeping between doing things, which is a pretty lousy piece of advice, but that's what it tells you what to do. Now, Google are not alone, because almost every API that you might choose to use has got some kind of rate limiting going on. With AppScript in Google, if you're using AppScript to access these APIs, it's going to be a little bit different than the rate limiting you come across when you use AppScript services. So first of all, why do people do this? Well, you've probably seen this picture before. If you overload something it's not designed to take, then nobody goes anywhere. So APIs are designed thinking about what the maximum number of people that are going to be using it at any one time is going to be, and therefore the infrastructure that gets put in place and everything else is built with that in mind. So rate limits are built in usually at the beginning in order to make sure that the traffic that arrives at an API is what was expected to arrive. However, it's not, when you hear something like you can do one thing per second. Now, every API has got a different way of implementing that. There are as many different ways of implementing that as there are APIs. But it's like this: a measurement window is the place over which the usage that someone's making of a resource is measured. So if something says I'm going to allow you to do one thing per second, it doesn't mean that every second it checks to see how many things you've done. More likely what it does is over a period of time, it checks how many times you've done that thing, and if it's more than it would like, it fails and stops you doing it then. So that's why the idea of waiting a second between each time you do something is probably not the right approach, and we'll get to that in a moment. So usually an API is an identity, and that's anything that can be identified, such as an IP address or something like this. In AppScript case, it's usually a user of a script, or sometimes it's a user across a script. And the units is how many things you can do. So that would be like the number of times you can access a resource, or maybe the number of data that you can transfer over a network. Lots of different things you can be measuring. And the time period is what they tell you. So sending a mail in AppScript, you can do one mail per second. So the 1 second is the time period that they talk about. But the window, they might measure that over 10 seconds, or maybe even 15 seconds. The Facebook Graph, for example, API, their measurement window is 15 minutes, even though they talk about the number of things that you can do per minute. So that's why every API under this covers is not exactly what it seems in terms of the documentation. So this is what Google tell you to do with that message, essentially. So this is accessing some service, and it's keeping on going while it's not finished doing that. And then the advice is process the result of your access, and then sleep, and then try again. And the amount of time that they tell you to sleep would be equal to the rate at which you can do things in a second. So that's what this code would do, and that's what Google are advising that you do if you hit that rate limit message. But the problem with that is that if the window period is not a second, well, even if it is a second actually, but let's say it's not a second, then that means you're wasting a lot of time. If you look at this representation, which is showing 10 accesses to some resource, and they take different amounts of time to both access the resource and also process the result of what you got back. Now, if you're following their advice, then in that 10 seconds with this kind of a pattern, you're sleeping a lot. And in fact, if you have a loop that does 180 things, then that means you're going to spend half of your processing time of your script just waiting. So that doesn't seem like a great approach. It's kind of foolproof. You'll never break the quota that way, but at the same time, you're making everything take twice as long, and you're potentially going to run out of processing time instead, which is probably even worse than having rate limit problems. So let's look at a different approach using something that's called exponential backoff. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on. So what you're doing here is that you're leveraging the measurement window being probably not a second. And the other thing that you're leveraging is that if we go back to the code here for a moment, processing the result takes a bit of time. So let's say that takes half a second. Then you're waiting an extra second that you didn't, an extra half a second you didn't have to, because part of the time between accessing the service the next time will be how long the service took to access minus the time you took to process it. So you're leveraging both of those things, the measurement window being not necessarily the same as the published rate, and secondly, you're taking advantage of the fact that you did spend some time anyway between the last time that you called it. So using exponential backoff, essentially what you do is you try it, and if it didn't work, you wait a bit and you try it again, and if it still didn't work, you wait a bit longer and you try it again. So this is the kind of pattern that you get with exponential backoff. So what that means is that compared to up here, where you only managed to do 5 things in the time, here you can do 9 things in the time. So let's talk about how that can be implemented. So, but first of all, let's think about exponential, what that even means. So the reason that you do that is because if you wait a fixed amount of time, then you're probably going to make the problem worse, because you're still going to be in the window that you already failed in. So first of all, you wait for a little bit of time, and if that's not good enough, you wait for a longer amount of time, an exponentially longer amount of time, because you keep on wanting to be pushed into wherever the next window is measured from, because you don't actually know where they're measured from. So this formula that we're looking at here would be how long you would sleep between each attempt. So the attempts is the number attempt that we're on, the first time, the second time, the third time, and so on. The sleep for is the default amount of time to sleep. I think in my library I use 750 milliseconds for that by default. And then we add a little bit of a randomness to that. And the reason for that is because let's just say that you're measuring an API that you're measuring by user, but you're accessing from 2 different scripts at the same time. It's possible that you're going to get into some kind of a loop competing with each other because they both access it at the same time, and they both wait for the same amount of time, and then they both access it at the same time and it fails. So adding some randomness to it simply means that you'll get out of those kind of race conditions. So that's what the formula looks like. But first of all, you've got to identify whether an error is worth trying again. So each API has got a different way of telling you whether or not it failed because you broke a rate limit. So if you're using an external API, they might return an error code, usually 500, 503. And sometimes they don't fail, but they contain some message in the response instead. But in AppScript, and this might change, by the way, Martin mentioned the error service at the beginning, and I'm hoping that this will give us a better way to identify the actual error that occurred. But anyway, we'll look at that probably next month. But for the moment, you have to examine the text that you get back from AppScript. And so some of the ones that you get back that are worth trying again are these. There's about 20 of them or something like that. So using exponential backoff, I do have a library that we'll talk about later on. This is my implementation of it. So now we change that loop that we were doing the processing to use exponential backoff to take care of retrying, all that formula we looked at and everything else. So now we're passing it a function of the thing we want it to do, which is the access to service piece. And then we don't have to wait here. There's no sleeping or waiting or anything like that, because if there was any waiting to have been done, exponential backoff would have taken care of it. So we can forget all about that problem if we just do it this way. So before we get to that, I actually wrote a rate limiting service this morning. Let me see if I can find it. So what this is, I know that AppScript has got plenty of rate limits already. You probably don't want any more, but this is your own rate limiting implemented in AppScript. It's pretty straightforward. I won't go through the code, but I'll distribute it later. But this is a rate limiting function. So I've got a test here, and we'll run it. Well, I'll start running it whilst we're talking about it. So I'm starting off the rate limiter. The first time I'm trying to run 15 things, and by the way, I'm saying here that I've got a window of 10 seconds, and I'm allowing 10 things to happen. In other words, I've got a rate limit of 1 per second, just the same as you see in a lot of the Google things. So the first time off, I'm going to run 15 things, so that should bust it for 5 of them. Next, I'm going to try sleeping, and that should bust it. And then I'm going to be using Exponential Backoff and pretending that I've had the kind of error that you get from AppScript. And so this is the result. So what we saw there is that we run out of quota for the last 5, just as AppScript would. Don't forget, this is a simulation of one that I've written. And the sleeper method took 22 seconds. And then Exponential Backoff noticed that it had to retry only twice out of that test that we just did, and it only took 12 seconds. So typically you're going to take half the time. It all really depends on how long your process takes. I've simulated one here of taking 400 milliseconds in all the cases. Then that's what you're really leveraging by using Exponential Backoff, the time that you took to run the thing, and along with the size of the window. So typically you're going to, first of all, forget all about the fact that sometimes things fail, because it'll take care of them all. And then secondly, you'll be able to make sure that things get done twice as fast as they otherwise would. So let's just get back to some other uses. So as I said, every API has got a different way of telling you if it failed. So Exponential Backoff that I've implemented here gives you a number of options, 2 of which are to supply a different function to check what a retriable error looks like. So for example, if you're using AppScript in a different language, then you might have to set up your own messages that AppScript sends back when you run out of quota. Another way is this look ahead function. So what that means is that it hasn't actually failed, because if you call some of the API, if you call the NASA API, for example, which is a really cool API if you haven't used it, by the way, it can access the moon lander camera and all sorts of stuff. But in any case, that has a rate limit, but it doesn't fail. It returns you a message in place of the results that says, hey, you failed. So you have to potentially be able to look at a response before you decide whether or not it's worth trying again. So you can have a look ahead function that checks the response, and it says, I'm going to retry it anyway, because it wasn't an error, but it was a message from the API that you've run out of rate limit. So that's the kind of some of the options that you can do. And another use is waiting for stuff to become available. If you use the GitHub API, for example, then just look at this code very quickly. It's getting a repository from GitHub, and if it isn't there, it's going to create it. And that all works fine. It creates the repo, and then after that, you want to get the details from the repo. But the problem is that the API hasn't quite registered the fact that that repo exists back in GitHub somewhere. So it doesn't find it. So even though it created it successfully, the other part of the API that gets the details didn't find it. So in that case, we have to put in a look ahead function here that says, if you didn't get any response, then wait a bit and try again. And eventually, GitHub will sort itself out, and then this will work properly. And finally, I think there's a few things in AppScript that are async. That's hardly any, actually. But one of them is BigQuery. If you do a BigQuery, fetch, then you're going to get back a response. But that response is not going to be the result of the query. It's going to be a thing that says whether or not the job is complete. And you have to wait for, usually what they say in the documentation is to keep on sleeping for a minute, for a second or something, until that job complete becomes true. But that's a waste of seconds by spending time waiting for things that might not be a problem. So you can use Exponential Backoff even for things like that. And it'll take care of the retrying and everything else. So what's this? Oh, this is just the final example, which is this is an API that returns, that actually looks like it's not going to fail, but it actually returns funny response codes to describe the fact that they've had a failure of that rate limiting type. So we're checking to see if the response code was any one of the things that say it's worth retrying, and then it's retrying whatever API this is for. I can't remember. So that's kind of all I have there. The code that I've showed you today, there's the useful library, which is the one that contains Exponential Backoff, is available through this ID. Oh, by the way, in case you didn't know, when you add libraries to your script project nowadays, you don't have to use that funny library key that we used to have to use. You can now use the actual file ID. So that's the ID of that library. Or alternatively, you can get it off GitHub and play around with it and make it your own, whatever. And that rate limit implementation that I showed at the beginning, if you want to take a look at that, or even implement your own rate limiter in your own web apps, or in fact, to get back to Steve's point, you could rate limit your unpaid for add-ons, for example. Then that's where you'll find the code for that too. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Again, I'm holding my tongue.
That must have been clear then.
I have another commercial question for you, Bruce.
Okay, yeah.
Do you, one of the themes of this particular hangout was the monetization part. How do you monetize all of the generosity you've put in place to give us all this code?
I'm going to take care of that at some point. No, actually, I don't. Buy the book. Buy the book.
Yeah, I buy my books.
Although saying that, you don't get much money off the book.
You don't get much money off that either. Buy the video course. I get more from that. No, actually, I write books. I do video courses, and people buy them. And one of the reasons that they do is because you share stuff that isn't that, and it helps people to get interested in what you do, and therefore join in. But I never charge for code. I mean, I'm very, very much a proponent of
super. Thank you.
Open source.
Bruce, could I just ask you to stop sharing your screen so we can see you?
Am I sharing my screen?
Yeah, just so we can.
Okay. Can you see me now?
There, perfect. Yeah. So we can thank you face to face. I think that's a really clear explanation. I think the measurement window thing is something, a lot of people won't, they'll just be going, oh yeah, I got to wait a second, and they're just given the constraints within that script with server time, you're just killing time for no reason. I suppose one of the things that we should really make clear is that we're talking about rate limiting here, and there are other quotas that you could potentially still hit into, if you're using advanced services, or well, not advanced services, if you're using other Google services and other APIs, URL fetch is going to come into the picture.
Yeah, so actually this is a big problem. I think that URL fetch does have rate limits, but not only does it have rate limits, it also has how many of them you can do in a day. And so that means you're double hit usually, because if you're using URL fetch, you're probably using an API, and that API itself may have rate limits. So you've got rate limits going on all over the place. It's quite hard to manage. And one of the problems is that the URL fetch quotas haven't been upgraded in the past, I don't know how many years. So what that means is that we're getting all these brilliant APIs coming along that Google keep throwing at us to use, and we're not seeing any opportunity to use them because we don't have enough quota. Every day I run out of URL fetch quota. So there is a place to report issues, by the way, and it's here. Let me just, you want me to share my screen again?
Yeah, if you want.
Yeah, hang on a second then. Twice in one day, that's a lot to ask.
Or I could share mine if you want. I've got it.
That's okay, I got it now. Have you got that now?
Yeah.
Right, so this place here, code.google.com, whatever that URL is, we'll distribute it later on, shows all the things that are problems with AppScript, either whether it's an enhancement request or whether it's an actual bug, and you can report stuff on here. And the way that they choose what they're going to work on is how many times something has been starred. So if you think this is an important issue, then you star it. So this particular one that we're looking at is one I reported a while ago, saying that URL fetch is just fairly useless nowadays. So you can all star this if you want to get more core or get them to look at it in any case. So that's that. Okay, I'm unshared again.
I was just going to make another comment too. You hinted at it, especially with add-ons that a lot of people are going to use, and they expect quality because Google products are typically good quality products with rare exceptions of downtime and so forth. So it's natural that the expectation is for the third-party developers. So that's why one of my strategies is also to leverage Exponential Backoff wherever I can. You plan for the worst and hope for the best sort of thing. So thank you for sharing that code, because you've had previous versions of that I have leveraged. So thanks.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, hi, this is Rudy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, thank you for that. It's always very generous. I had a general question. A lot of this stuff is new to me. I've been playing around with, what do you call it, Node.js, and trying to come up with understanding the asynchronous stuff. And when you mentioned BigQuery, I think it was, as you saying, is there any concept of promises or callbacks or anything else like that can be done with things that might be asynchronous or in this Google AppScript world, other than an approach like this?
Yeah, well, I'm a great fan of promises and so on, and there's no point in having promises in AppScript because nothing's asynchronous apart from that one thing that we just looked at. But however, having said that, I think I published a post quite recently about using promises in AppScript, and I implemented a library for that, in fact. And the reason is not because you gain anything in particular by it, apart from organizationally, but what it means is that you can use the same code client-side in your add-ons as you do server-side in AppScript. And therefore, what then happens is that if it's running on the client, it's going to be asynchronous. If it's not running on the client, it won't be. But yet the same structure's in place. Now, it may well be that one day we'll have asynchronicity, but I doubt it, because don't forget the AppScript runs on the server, it doesn't run in your browser. So I don't see, you don't have the same opportunity for parallelism, etc., that you've got on the browser. So the answer to your question is plenty of opportunities for asynchronicity on the client side. And in fact, if you look at google.script.run, which is how you communicate from the client side back to the server side, that of course is asynchronous. And I've got a version of that that's promise-based as well, and it really makes things a lot simpler.
Thanks. Lots to think about.
Yeah. Well, I can chime in just for a second on that. As you said, everything in Google AppScript is synchronous, but the way that the scripts work is more on a threaded model, than a single event model. You know, Node.js works off of a single thread with events, whereas AppScript works on it's threaded, meaning that every time you make a call to your AppScript, you actually get a new instance of your script. So you can make, you know, 40 different calls to your script, and instead of having one script that handles 40 different events, it's actually creating 40 different instances of your script. And it's a very different model than the way Node.js does, and it's very specific and intended. That's the actual intended purpose. It actually creates very easy to write code, and in fact, that's the reason we don't have promises or async. Those things are added to JavaScript because of the insanity of trying to work in that single-threaded event model. We don't have to deal with those issues in AppScript since it works as off a threaded model.
Yeah, I'd love to see any links on that topic if anybody had any.
Yeah, I've got loads of stuff on that. I can send it to you if you like.
He also has a book. I don't know if we've mentioned that.
Yeah.
Say again?
He also has a book. I don't know if we've mentioned that.
Note taken. What about also dividing up? Say you had a chunk in your add-on. There's a place where you do a lot of logic and you wanted to speed it up. You know, if you talk about this threaded model, is there a way to divide up the work, and then when all the work's done, bring it back? If you want to speed up pieces of your code.
What you mean that's running on the client side?
Yeah, the client clicks on a menu action, and it fires off a server-side function. And in that server-side function, there's logic that's crunching on the spreadsheet. But say that logic starts with a big giant read, and you wanted to speed up the logic in that server-side function. Was there a way to divide up the work? Or I say, you do the read and then parse out the work, and then wait for the work, and then bring it back in a way that makes sense for your business logic.
So actually, I've got an example of that too. But in fact, what I do is I delegate the work to the client. So what you then do is that you can, let's just say that you've got a spreadsheet. No, let's just say you've got 10 sheets on your spreadsheet, and you want to do some work to each one of them. Then you can read the data. You can pass it off to the client side. The client does the work on the data and returns the result. But not only that, you can do it 10 times. You can do 10 times the client, so it does it all at once in parallel, and then you can orchestrate the results as they come back, and then you're done. So it's kind of complicated, but it's parallelism by delegating stuff that can be done by the client from the server. So it's kind of the opposite of what you said, except that I think the intention is exactly what you were after, right?
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Yeah. And also, if you look on my GitHub page, which I think is just Spencer-Easton, on my PubSub app, I use PubSub to do this kind of thing where I get a job that'll come into one specific script, and then it actually breaks that down into smaller chunks and puts them in the PubSub queue, and then I have that instantiates several different versions, more instances of my script. Each one handles a chunk of it, and then it sends it back to the main one already done. Yeah. I use PubSub, which is at my levels, it's a free service because I only use a couple million queries, not tens of millions. And it works pretty well. Also, if you're on the client side, every time you do a Google script run, it'll actually instantiate a new version. So you can actually, on the client side, chunk it into pieces and send that chunk using a Google script run. And every time you do that, it'll create a whole new thread, which will asynchronously return it back to the client, which is Bruce was talking about earlier. So both of those are very, actually not too hard ways of setting up division of work using the threaded model. And I guess that might be something we could talk about later because it's a very useful setup.
Yeah, I was also going to add to that. correct me if I'm wrong, but I think each time from the client, let's say you're doing these parallel calls to the server side, I believe they're in a silo sense or a thread, they have their own 6-minute limit.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. Which is another advantage. Yep.
Yep.
And further down the rabbit hole we go. Thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Okay, so I think we're ready to wrap up. Martin, do you want to do the honors?
Yes. So I'd like to thank you for coming. Hopefully you've found this the show useful. We'll be back next month sometime. We've actually got a long list of things to follow. It might be a 2-hour show. But anyway, I would like to thank Bruce and Steve and Spencer for their contributions as well. Just to say, this is a community show, so we are completely open to people. If you've got something you want to show, even if it's a problem you want to put to some of the experts we've got in our community and ask them, on the show, how would you solve this? We're more than happy to take that challenge on, he says, on behalf of other people mostly. And also, we're always looking for your feedback about the show. So thanks for the people that have posted comments on our YouTube channel, on the Totally Unscripted page. We've got an event form, a comment box form. So if there's anything you want, just drop it in there, or you can just contact us through various means. And I think that's everything. Have I forgotten anything, Bruce?
No, I think that's probably it.
I'm looking forward to the edit on this one. An hour. Oh my God.
An hour, yeah.
And so thanks again, and we'll see you next month sometime.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Cheers. Thank you.